Sugar Ray Robinson, in most boxing circles, is regarded as the greatest boxer of all time. Yet despite this, it's always been considered that there's very little to no footage of him in his prime. A prime in which he lost just once in close to 130 fights and went 91 straight fights unbeaten. And getting straight to the point, I decided to look and see what footage there was available of Robinson as a welterweight, and I was able to find substantial amounts of footage of a welterweight Sugar Ray Robinson in his peak years. So what I've decided to do is detail Robinson's impeccable rise and unmatched prime in boxing, matching the footage that we have, whilst breaking down that incredible run that came before his conquest of the middleweight division. Now we're going to start off during Robinson's amateur days. This is 1939, where he takes on Louis Valentine in the featherweight Golden Gloves final. Now Robinson as an amateur had a supposed record of 85 wins to 0 defeats, with 69 knockouts, 40 coming in the first round, although that is disputed. And whilst the quality of this particular fight isn't the best in regards to the footage, it's incredible the amount of footage we have of Robinson in his amateur days, and more so in his welterweight days, which I wasn't aware of how much there was out there of a prime Robinson until I dug into the archives. Now whilst his amateur record is disputed, he did win the Golden Gloves twice back to back, here against Valentine in 1939 and the following year, in which he moved up to lightweight. And a very interesting fact about Robinson as an amateur is that he actually boxed Willie Pep in the amateurs. There's obviously no footage of that fight, but the footage that you're seeing here is Robinson boxing Willie Pep later on in their lives in an exhibition, which probably the two greatest fighters of the 1940s actually having boxed each other. It's just a cool little fact, and Robinson beat Pep in the amateurs. And then moving on to this next clip is Robinson winning the lightweight Golden Gloves in 1940. Now I want to give a shout out to the Legends of Boxing in Colour, because that channel has restored so many of these clips that I found, and they're extremely rare, so make sure you check out that page. Here in 1940, we got a 19-year-old Sugar Ray Robinson at lightweight. He's boxing Andy Nanella, and a funny comment on the Instagram post I put about this is just Andy's luck to draw the greatest fighter of all time in his Golden Gloves finals, which, looking back, he was probably quite proud to have boxed Sugar Ray Robinson. But unlike the 1939 footage, this is a lot clearer, and we can see just how sharp and vicious a young Robinson was. Those doubled and trebled and quadrupled hooks that he would become so famous for in his pro career, and just the power he had as a young man. It would be in the next year, 1940, in which he would turn pro under the name Sugar Ray Robinson. Robinson was actually born Walker Smith, but it was borrowing a friend's amateur card, that friend named Ray Robinson, in which he got that famous name. And it was his manager, George Gainford, who stated when he was watching Robinson that he was as sweet as sugar, which is where that iconic nickname came in. And we're going to fast forward slightly now to 1946, the first pro fight we have of Sugar Ray Robinson against Tony Riccio. He won this bout in the 4th round. His record was already 60 wins to 1 defeat and 1 draw. And this is the first sign of a prime welterweight Sugar Ray Robinson. Now I will analyse a few of the clips, but first I just want to cover what he'd already done. Robinson in these years had already beaten the legendary Fritzy Zivic twice, Hall of Famer Maxi Berger, Jake LaMotta 4 times, and they'd already fought 5 times, with the Raging Bull beating him in his 40th fight, Marty Servo and Izzy Gennazo twice, Tommy Bell, who he would eventually win the welterweight title against at the end of this year, Olympic silver medalist California Jackie Wilson, and a fading Henry Armstrong, who's my number 2 pound for pound all time. Now when we look through these older clips of a prime Robinson, you notice the defensive sharpness on display. You can see the vicious intent he used to whip his shots in with. But what I like, and what we didn't see as much of in his 50s wars, is the defensive responsibility after he throws. He hits and doesn't get hit back, doubles up the hooks, and catches Riccio as he comes in. Now it's worth saying that there aren't full fights of a prime Robinson, it's clips, and I've edited these down even more so. So there is more footage than I'm showing you if you type in the fights. Now he boxed 10 days later, stopping O'Neal Bell in 2 rounds, and 12 days after that, he boxed Cliff Beckett, which is the footage you're seeing here, in February of 1946. Now this footage is different to the fight against Riccio. We can see Robinson boxing on that back foot more, just floating, the elegant footwork, the impeccable jab. He obviously had his hands reasonably low, but In this footage, I think we can see some of the influence that Joe Louis inspired into Sugar Ray Robinson, and I think undeniably some of the influence that Muhammad Ali would take from Robinson in the 60s. Robinson would ultimately go on to dispatch of Beckett in 4 rounds. I was only able to find 1 round of this fight, but it's just pure poetry and motion, the balance, the head movement, and obviously there's a quick knockdown we see in there too. And it's pretty amazing how many fights of Robinson's almost unheard of prime were filmed in such a short amount of time, because this was his next fight against Sammy Angott, the lightweight world champion and a serious level Hall of Famer. Now, I didn't mention it before, but Robinson had already beaten Angott twice before this fight. Angott would take him the distance all 3 times they fought, which is a credit to him. And he's a serious fighter, one of the all-time great lightweights. He was the only man to defeat a prime Willie Pep in Willie Pep's first 130 or so fights. He also beat Bob Montgomery and the legendary Ike Williams via stoppage. Angott also fought Henry Armstrong. His resume is seriously stacked. We see here he's outmatched and outsized by Robinson, but his game he's throwing with him, and he has to smother Robinson's work. Robinson's too big and too sharp, but Angott is a serious Hall of Famer, and I think we can see here against such a great opponent just how good he was. And as we see from Robinson, the speed, timing and fluidity of a welterweight Sugar Ray is just next level. Just 10 days after that Angott fight, Robinson beat Izzy Gennazo again over 10 rounds, and the following week stepped into the ring for the 67th time, as we see here, stopping Freddie Flores. Now this is just spiteful, devastating stuff. Doubling up those hooks to the body, getting in and out of range. We can see the savage whip that I've never seen anyone else really get in the body shots. You've got the bolo punch, just a devastating punch. The outdated kidney punch. You could just see just how sharp Robinson was here, how cut he was physically, the defensive sharpness on display too, making his opponents miss, being comfortable both at range and in the pocket. This rare welterweight footage can really give us serious insight into just how unbeatable Robinson must have been in his prime. It's always been said that a prime Robinson was the most unbeatable fighter ever, and the statistics back that. After defeating Flores here, Robinson extended his record to 65 wins, to 1 defeat and 1 draw with 44 knockouts. And most amazingly, he wasn't even the welterweight champion by this point. He didn't fight for the title until his 76th fight. Now after the Flores fight in March, Robinson would win his next 9 fights that year, ultimately winning the welterweight title off of Tommy Bell in December of that year. Now as I say, it's amazing we have this footage because we don't have any footage of his next 22 fights over a period of around 2 years where Robinson went 22-0 with 16 knockouts in that time. Now we fast forward to 1948, June the 28th, where we have some pretty rare footage filmed at ringside of Robinson defending his welterweight world title against Bernard Docusen. Now just before we get into this fight, I mean, the sharpness of the defense and counter-punching of Robinson here is just something else. The pivoting off the shots. You can just see how hard he is to pin down, and he's razor sharp on anything. Anything that you throw, he's going to counter you instantly with a really brutal shot. But in looking into this subject, it was actually trying to find Harry Greb footage that made me look at some Robinson footage. I was always, as I say, under the impression there is no footage of a prime Robinson at welterweight. But there's actually 2 fights of his where he's defending the welterweight title. Which again, I don't know why it was always considered there is no footage, but there you go. Anyway, going into this fight, he had beaten California Jackie Wilson again via TKO, and he had sadly killed Jimmy Doyle in his first defense of the welterweight title. After this fight, Robinson would go on to defeat the legendary Cuban Kid Gavilan twice. Gavilan would be a formidable welterweight champion after Robinson moved up to middleweight. And now we move on to August the 9th, 1950, Robinson's last ever defense of the welterweight title against Charlie Fusari. He had already moved up by this point, winning the Pennsylvania State middleweight title against Robert Villamain in his fight prior to this, but this was a welterweight title fight. Besides his fights with Gavilan, he had also TKO'd Aaron Wade, a member of the formidable Black Murderers Row, and going into this fight, had a record of 111-1 with 2 draws. He would ultimately go 129-1-2 before losing to Randolph Turpin. Robinson outpointed Fusari and then 6 months and 9 fights later won the middleweight world title, defeating Jake LaMotta for a 5th and final time. And those are the fight films that we have available of Sugar Ray Robinson in his prime as a welterweight during that 91 fight unbeaten streak. As I say, I've clipped these down, so there's a lot more footage out there. Some of these have 15 minutes worth of tape of each fight. And Robinson had become a superstar after his welterweight campaign. So he went on his European tour, and lots of the fights between his last welterweight title win and his first middleweight title win were filmed. But these fights are Robinson at what I believe was his very best. As a middleweight, he scored so many iconic knockouts. The brutal shot against Rocky Graziano, that formidable combination, the one-punch left hook against Gene Fullmer, the excellent fights against Basilio. But much of that footage is Robinson in his 30s. Here we have him in his teens and 20s at his devastating best. And it's incredible to see just how sharp and well-rounded the greatest boxer of all time was in his prime.